Hey, it's Martin Schneider, VP and Principal Analyst here at Constellation, covering all things mid-market CRM, sales automation, and growth technologies, and some other stuff.
And I'm Larry Dignan, Editor-in-Chief of Constellation Insights, and we're your co-host for CRTV, and this is episode 96. Go figure. We're here to talk about the latest news and trends in enterprise tech. We'll kick off with the news, and then after that, I'll talk to BT 150 member Karen Higgins-Carter.
And then I'll be talking about some new research I'm publishing on Totango, which is really representative of some interesting things going on in customer success and growth technology.
All right, so let's get to the news. Whole lot of stuff for the first week where we're sort of just revving up for 2025. There's a whole lot of stuff, but we had NRF, we got kickoff to earnings season, we got a bunch of, we had that CXO call where everybody's sort of like, hey, our budget's going to be X. And they thought it was going to be X like 2 months ago. And now it's more like, well, let's do some cost cutting. It's a little, I think we're in for a very volatile year.
Yeah.
And some of that volatility was right out the gate with CES 2025. There was no news out of that from like the electronics consumer stuff. But Jensen Huang, NVIDIA's CEO, I like to call him Fonzie. By the way, he got a new leather jacket, which was kind of very swaggy up there. But he basically was riffing at this analyst Q&A, and he said quantum computing's 15 to 30 years away. And it seems a little long in the tooth for me. It's probably, say 6 to 10 years away from really being productive and something we have to worry about. But it cratered quantum stocks all over the place. And, the other thing that's happening is as those stocks were cratering, and they got way ahead of themselves. So the pure play quantum companies, D-Wave, Rigetti, IonQ, they all came out saying, hey, we have, they've pre-announced their bookings, strong bookings and all that stuff. I mean, the thing to keep in mind here, bookings is not revenue. So in terms of revenue, these pure play quantum companies, they're all small, very small. But either way, it spurred this whole debate in the whole quantum space and when CXOs have to worry about it. So I spent some time writing about that. The other thing is Microsoft came out with their Quantum Ready initiative, which is basically a set of services that help enterprises think through quantum technology and what they want to do with it and use cases to think about. It's sort of similar to what AWS announced at the end of 2024. So the cloud providers are clearly, thinking there's going to be quantum use cases. The pure plays think that. Jensen doesn't think that, which spurred this whole debate about quantum technology. So it's going to be fascinating to watch. But it was quite the kerfuffle to start the year off with.
Yeah. I think, like you said, kind of an interesting start to the year. NRF going on. Some interesting news coming out of that from Salesforce as they expand their agent force. And, obviously it's all things agent force at Salesforce right now. But, with retail, it's kind of interesting because, we always think of Salesforce as this B2B powerhouse, and they are. But they do have significant B2C and retail products and customers and a lot of offerings. But, bringing agent force into retail is really interesting for a number of reasons. One, it does strengthen their B2C push and their play in retail and broadening their addressable market as a company that large as a $40 billion company looking for new growth opportunities, which is always interesting, right? And the product itself has a lot of interesting capabilities, bringing a lot of like point of sale and other things like that with agentic AI to automate some of those like incredibly common processes that you think about in retail operations. Everything from inventory management to returns management, even setting up storefronts and doing that type of stuff is really, really cool that the AI can do a lot of that, because you still, you're helping humans. You're not doing a lot of human replacement there in a lot of ways. But the other angle I think is really interesting is how the Agentforce retail capabilities can actually help especially smaller B2B companies who are looking to expand their channels, right? Their footprint in other channels, becoming more multi or omni-channel, creating more frictionless commerce. So being able, again, to set up a storefront so that you can now digitally sell things and utilize workflow and AI and other tools to really kind of automate reorder and expansion and retention through these, this agentic AI with workflow, these, with digital storefronts and commerce, bringing Commerce Cloud and Retail Cloud into Sales Cloud customer bases and things like that. So some really interesting opportunity for a company like Salesforce to really extend not just into new markets and expand its retail footprint, but also really sell more things to its existing customer base as, B2B experiences, need to look more like B2C experiences. So that's a really interesting, that was probably the top news I think that came out of NRF, at least around the interest to B2B, and then a company like Salesforce, kind of doubling down a bit on its retail presence.
Yeah, there was a whole lot of AI chatbots. I think Adobe came out with something that said
Sure.
A lot of the holiday sales were basically driven by generative AI bots.
Yeah.
I think the thing to watch with Salesforce and Agentforce and targeting retailers is they're going to run head first into Shopify.
Sure.
Shopify, if you've been paying attention to them, they started out with the smaller retailers.
No, they're going up big time. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they moved up the stack to sort of divisions of larger retailers. And now they're basically the retail OS in a lot of places. So you see a lot of companies, the larger retailers, basically, doubling down on Shopify, which is a threat to Salesforce. So you see Salesforce with Agentforce trying to go downstream a bit. And then Shopify is moving up the stack. Shopify hasn't gone crazy talking about agents, but they're all there with the storefronts. They've layered in generative AI through everything, whether it's marketing pitches or whatever. And they're doing some really nice commerce stuff. So it's going to remain to be seen how that works out. Again, though, like you said, Salesforce is selling to its existing base, and you can make a whole lot of dough doing that. So I don't necessarily think Salesforce has to go out and prospect. What they need to do is get everybody on Agentforce, and the rest will take care of itself. All right, well, that's all we have for the news this week. And stay tuned for my interview with Karen Higgins-Carter. And then Martin will follow up with his CR Pulse. Hi, I'm Larry Dignan with Constellation Insights, and we're here with Karen Higgins-Carter. She's been a CIO multiple times, serves on some boards. She's had stints at Gilbane Building, Webster Bank, MFUG, and various GE divisions. Hi, Karen. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Larry. Thanks for having me.
And so we've been doing a tour with the Constellation Research AI 150, and just wanted to catch up with you on some practical AI and talk about some boardroom issues and things like that. So I guess let's just start at the top. How are you, you used to be an operator for a while. How are you advising boards when it comes to approaching AI?
Well, I think one thing to know is that it's a common opportunity across sectors. I think if you think about, say, Amazon, for example, what comes to mind first is a very technology heavy digital company, and they have a very physical aspect to that business: warehouses, planes, trucks, logistics. When you think about construction at the other end of the spectrum, you think about a very physical business, that the product first and foremost is a physical product, but there's a tremendous amount of information flow that is involved in the delivery of the product. Same with pharma, and same with financial services, that there's always a balance between a digital and information flow aspect of that business, as well as a physical aspect of that business. So making sure that you're thinking about the opportunity holistically and not necessarily from a biased point of view about what business are you in is what I would say is a starting point.
So are boardrooms more interested in sort of that physical AI kind of play now? I mean, because there's so many industries that haven't, last 2 years have really been about AI and productivity gains and, sort of creative fields. I guess what's your take on AI going into the, physical world more?
I would say what boards are most interested in is what their shareholders expect them to do, which is to pick the right sectors for that business to participate in, understand how they're positioned in those sectors, how they'll succeed in the short term and create value in the long term, manage unit economics. I don't think any of that changes necessarily with AI. Boards are interested from a strong point of business acumen. What are the practical opportunities in the experiments that the management team is pursuing? And concurrent with that, what are the inherent risks and how are they managing those?
So in terms of, what you're seeing in the field, and not only that, when you were a CIO, how do you choose whether to build your own AI? I guess what's the buy versus build equation here?
Yeah, I think it's getting to your roots in terms of what you are. If you don't currently participate in the technology sector and you don't have that as a core competency, I think starting with buying and partnering with other companies to develop a capability is a place to start. It's where you can get some near-term value. It's also where you can explore how it is operationalized within your company. How do roles change? What roles go away? What are the impacts for or the implications for workforce planning? As well as then how do you commercialize it? So how do you realize the value over time? How do your end customers adopt it? I think so. The easiest way to get there is to start by buying AI and then think about, is there an opportunity for real differentiation that we can fund and afford over time by creating our own?
So when you were a CIO, I guess what was the mix of buy versus build?
By and large, almost all buy, simply
Okay.
because in the sectors I've worked in, between financial services, in the mid-sized bank space, in construction, pharma, it is not technology companies. They are companies that benefit greatly from technology and data and AI, but are not set up in a way that you can allocate sufficient capital to really have a sustainable differentiation by developing your own, at least not at this point in time. And so I've always seen the model that works best is where corporates can contribute their knowledge of the industry, their data, and partner with the right venture capital company, with their portfolio companies, and other partners to develop something unique at the intersection of those three things. And that's where I found the best operating model, not necessarily putting yourself at the center of it and having to make it all yourself, but partnering with others who bring the depth of technology knowledge that's needed. But most startups, they don't have a product without data from a corporate partner. And they don't necessarily have the depth of industry knowledge to really understand the application of AI and all of the commercial benefits and the operationalization factors that need to be addressed. And so it's through that partnership that you can very efficiently get started and learn.
How do you advise boards in terms of bridging that gap between, I guess the hype and the reality? Like I know, 2024 was, boards were like, what are we doing on AI? And not necessarily thought through. Has that gap closed a bit in terms of, I guess what they're asking for and what they read in the headlines?
Yeah, I think it's changing. I think what I have seen practically is we're seeing AI automate tasks, but not necessarily automate roles. And so it brings the question about, in terms of what are we really trying to achieve here and what value do we have line of sight to? So I see a more tailored approach to what are the, say, top 3, top 5 use cases, and let's bring those all the way through the process. So let's go through due diligence. Let's understand what the inherent risks are. Who does this not work for? And is that in line with our values? Then operationalizing it. Do we have to restructure some aspects of our workforce in order to eliminate roles? And I'm not advocating that that is a great objective for AI, but I think it is the reality that we have to proactively adapt the workforce and support people in transitioning into roles that will exist in the future. And then finally, how do we commercialize this experiment? How do we realize the benefit? How do we get customers to adopt it? How do we get our workforce to adopt it in a way that we realize the initial business case? So I think the focus has changed from running lots of prototypes and being in kind of prototype purgatory to taking a few use cases all the way through that process so you can really pilot the learnings that you get through experimentation.
How do you see agentic AI developing over the next year and change?
Yeah, I think it'll be more so, and this is just, off the top of my head, more so deployed in less regulated industries. I don't have any inside information, but I don't necessarily see it deployed in areas that are traditionally more heavily regulated. For example, if you look at the EU AI Act, classifies use cases into risk levels. Credit decisioning has always been an area, even pre-AI hype, where a focus on explainability for consumer credit has been front and center. I see the same thing for agentic AI, that understanding and being able to trust decisions that are made by an agent and not a human. And there is bias, in that scrutiny on the agent, not necessarily just on the human. But I see that evolving more slowly in more regulated spaces than not. But it's going to come down to adoption. That is where the value, I think, will be created or not created, in terms of what are consumers willing to adopt, and how are you going to shape your workforce in a way that you get the value.
Yeah, I think right now a lot of the discussions about agentic AI really revolves around digital labor, and which is kind of code for getting rid of some jobs. It's sort of couched in you can scale and hire more people, digital people. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch that play out.
Well, yeah, and I think there's a bias that we have right now in terms of agentic AI supporting the workforce and augmenting people's roles and making better roles. I think we have to face the reality that as a general purpose technology, it will change the shape of the workforce over time. And it's a moral obligation for teams to prepare the workforce for that eventuality. I think in the same way that there isn't a typist pool anymore. That capability is now decentralized because of word processing. Same thing with graphics. If you remember in the olden days, the centralized graphics team that did everybody's graphics. And now we have a few specialized teams that may work on proposals that are augmented by AI, but by and large, people are expected to understand PowerPoint and write their own presentations. I see the same thing with software development, in terms of the evolution of software development becoming a more common skill with the right guardrails to ensure that you're producing a high quality and secure product. And I think we're doing people a disservice if we shy away from that eventuality, and that being people first is about first working in reality of where the workforce is going and supporting people in transitioning to the future, because the future comes. We can't necessarily predict when and exactly where, and it'll come in an uneven way. But setting that expectation that roles will change, and we may need fewer of these types of roles, but we need more of these roles, and how people can participate in the future is a fundamental to human capital management.
So what's the role of change management? It's an oldie but a goodie, but I've heard it come up in AI projects basically for the last year. Like just some of that blocking and tackling in terms of change management, because the labor force, your workers are freaked out, and if the change management isn't there, I guess what are some of the best practices boardrooms and, operators need to think about?
Yeah, I would say really two things. I think first, starting from a future back perspective, like painting a shared picture of, or I should say, a shared hypothesis of what you believe the future may look like. And then looking at the first steps that you're taking through the lens of that future. And is it moving you there? I think often a trap to fall into is this stream of consciousness, technology investment and development. Like, wouldn't it be cool if we did this? And I think a lot of startups really feed that dynamic within larger corporate customers, where you can see a specific use case via product-led growth that is amplified by their sources of capital, that it's easy to fall into the trap of just pursuing multiple use cases that come your way via that channel. And you can upset a lot of the workforce if they don't necessarily have a picture of the future and you're working backwards from there. So I think getting the approach right can help smooth the change management challenges. Secondly, I think there's two things. I think strategy needs to be a broad-based exercise. I think the evolution of the technology state is critically important. The evolution and the robustness of your data environments, your data architecture, your data control frameworks are fundamental to executing any strategy in the future state. I think, though, it's important to pivot to ensuring that then you can execute. What slows people down, in my experience, is when you have a culture where anybody can veto what the strategic direction is. And so doing both of those things in parallel, painting a hypothesis of the picture of the future, working backwards to then how does that inform the experiments that we want to do today, understanding the impacts on the workforce, having a broad-based set of inputs into strategic planning, things that you haven't necessarily considered in the past, and then ensuring that it's not immovable. You can still evolve it, but you don't fall into a trap of anybody can veto it.
All righty. Any final words or thoughts to add?
I would say, the last thought, I'm a risk manager at heart, and risk management is about taking the right risks, not taking no risks. And particularly with AI, the first question that any of us should ask is, for whom does this not work? And are we okay with that? So understanding what risks are and how to mitigate those. And then is that in line with our values? I have heard that, the biggest risk is not taking a risk. I think the biggest risk is taking a risk that you don't know that you're taking. So the basics of enterprise risk management, risk identification, and mitigation, such that you can be an enabler, is critical to the success of any strategy.
All right. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Larry.
Hey, this is Martin Schneider at Constellation Research, here to talk about a new CR Pulse I've just published this month on Totango and customer success technology. The customer success space is really interesting right now for a number of reasons. One is that, of course, AI is changing everything, right? The amount of AI that everybody's putting into their technology, but also the amount of data sources and data intelligence that's being injected into pretty much everything across the CRM, customer success, marketing automation. It's almost, it's almost blinding, right? But before your head spins, let's think about it. And when you think about customer success, right, what's the most important thing, right? It's information about the customer, right? So where customer success was really just kind of like CRM for post-sale, a lot of that is changing, and the customer success industry really understands that and gets that, right? And AI and intelligent workflow and really smart, data to decisions capabilities is really changing the game for these providers and then also for customer success organizations, right? Because customer success organizations are being challenged to not just renew, but also to expand, build relationships, essentially being, way more responsible for customer lifetime value than ever before. And that's really important. So when you think about where customer success was in this idea of, basically when you deploy it at the beginning, it's kind of like an empty database that you might integrate with your Salesforce, CRM, things like that, maybe a little bit ERP. That's about it, right? That's what you had. And the workflows were kind of predetermined, built around, QBRs and other kind of set milestones and metrics around, the typical customer lifecycle of post-sale onboarding, renewal, potential expansion, right? But now with, this complete explosion of data sources and AI, we can really start to create these much more dynamic experiences for customer success managers and other users of this software to be much more predictive, much more proactive, and much more targeted in how they engage with customers and when, right? Now, Totango gets it, right? And Totango's done some really interesting things over the past year or so. One is they made a very interesting acquisition in a company called Parative, which is really like a lot of AI and customer intelligence and pulling in customer data from all different sources and creating, predictive insights around it. So what Parative has done for Totango is really make it a far more dynamic and predictive engine rather than a, let's say, call it a fixed customer, engagement model support, right? So really enabling people to take, proactive triggers and insights and really understand the customer much better to figure out, when should we engage? When should we reach out? What are the potential positives in terms of new opportunities for expansion and early renewal? And then what are the negatives? Who do we need to jump in front of to make sure that we don't have churn and lose revenue, right? So really supporting growth in a really interesting way and not just customer success in the more generic sense. So that acquisition, really, really huge. But what it also does is makes Totango a multi-product company where essentially they just kind of had, here's our customer success software, kind of take it or leave it. And that's it, right? But now they've got 3 products that they're bringing to market in Totango, the core customer success management. They've got Unison, which is some really interesting, that's a lot of that Parative kind of customer intelligence, customer data insights, which again, can really help with targeting, with understanding and measurement and all these interesting metrics. And then they've got Catalyst, which is really a growth technology, really kind of growth ops, right? Which is really exciting. So when you look at this company now, which, a year or so ago was just a single product, really only being able to sell into customer success, now they've got multiple products selling into really kind of becoming into any kind of revenue operations team. As I've been talking about in a lot of my research, this emergence of the office of or a chief growth officer and really taking growth as an overarching concept and not just thinking of it as sales or success, really kind of bringing it together and having one person or committee manage this idea of much more predictive and strategic growth. They can sell into these organizations with more products and obviously with a larger footprint, right? So really great for their business, but also it's win-win for the customers because they're actually getting more capabilities, more AI, more insights to actually drive growth. And really that kind of brings it to the third point, right? So again, where we think of post-sale is where customer success kind of lived, right? And it's an important concept and it needs to be there. Making that much more growth oriented and thinking of it full journey and not just post-sale is way more important, way more strategic, and going to be way more effective. And when, Totango made this very important acquisition, broke out into these multiple products, right? Now they've got this capability to be a growth ops, like I said, a growth ops company, not just a customer success company. So again, that opens them up to more customer opportunities, but it also enables their existing customers to embrace more technology, to better support almost the entire customer life cycle, to drive much more profitable growth at every turn. So, I think you're going to see more companies in the customer success space, the competitors to Totango, like Gainsight and others, start to think more about this and talk more about this. And they are. But I think Totango's really taken an interesting move here to be a leader in doing this move. So it's really interesting. So what we're looking at in Totango is really taking on that kind of growth ops rather than just like rev ops and customer success or sales automation, and really kind of moving towards this really interesting full journey orchestration that not a lot of vendors can provide. So it'll be really interesting to see how they continue to bring this to market, how they continue to execute on that, because it is a little bit of a new concept. Like I said, this chief growth officer, or thinking about growth holistically or more strategically. But Totango's, there to support, growth organizations as well as customer success organizations and RevOps teams. So they've got really cool data intelligence tools to really bring to the table with their customer success tools that will expand their footprint and really make for some really interesting implementations among their customer base. So if you are a chief customer officer, a chief revenue officer, a chief growth officer, if you are, someone who's really thinking about growth strategically and trying to get both more top line and bottom line growth, you want to grow, but you also want to grow more profitably and be more operationally efficient. Look into Totango if you haven't already, or if you're at a reevaluation stage with your customer success software, because it's going to need to be more than just a very static tool for managing QBRs and doing the much more structured engagement models that we have in terms of post-sale. It needs to be more dynamic. It needs to be more predictive. It needs to be more prescriptive and proactive, right? So, and companies like Totango are making the changes and making the innovations to do that. So really start to kind of rethink how you're approaching your customer success software and thinking about it more as a growth supporting platform. That CR Pulse is ready and out there on ConstellationR.com. Clients can download it today, and if not, you can always click on to contact us on the website to learn how to become a client to grab that research and a whole lot more. So thanks a lot. Well, that is a wrap on episode 96 of CRTV. Watch for our next episode in 2 weeks.
That's right. Co-hosts Holger Mueller and Liz Miller will bring you episode 97 of CRTV. In the meantime, follow us on LinkedIn, X at ConstellationR, and hashtag CRTV show. Also follow us on all those other channels.
Yep. Don't forget to subscribe to Constellation Research TV on YouTube, and subscribe to CR Insights at ConstellationR.com to keep up with Larry's all of his pontifications on all things tech and all the news. Larry is a machine, and there's always great stuff coming out. So make sure you subscribe.
I'm a pontification machine.
All right, guys. Have a great week.
Ta-da!
Ta-da. Beautiful downtown Philadelphia.
I have the link too. And it is all you.
Hey, this is Martin Schneider, Constellation Research's VP and Principal Analyst, covering all things.
The energy there was just
Let me start again.
Overwhelming.
It's Monday, we don't usually do these.
Yeah, we're gonna need to redo that. Sorry, Martin.
For sure. No worries.
Sounds like you were hiccuping.
Yeah.
Now what's next from you, Martin?
And then I'm going to be talking about, let's do this whole thing over.
There's kind of like some long pauses, so
Yep.
maybe
Let's
just
keep
try
it-
to
yeah.
remove those.
Yeah, let's jump on each other's a little bit. Okay, let me start it up. All right.
Well, that's all we
Sure.
have for the news this week. Oh, we did that already.
Yeah, we did that.
And the stream of pontification.
More on quantity, not length.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just keep shooting.
Velocity, not verbosity.
Yeah.
Yes, perfect.